Well, you've made it to District Grants 103. Hopefully, that means you successfully watched and learned from District Grants 101 and 102. I'm sorry to report that I think these are getting longer as we go, so we're not going to waste any time and dive right in. In this section, we're going to talk about executive summaries. You only have 2 pages to make your argument, so let's talk about what not to do and what to do. All right, so weak summary pitfalls. The biggest problem that I see is people who are wordy and meandering. You only have 2 pages, so you really need to get to the point. There is a problem when you use too much space to describe unrelated functions of the organization. Your organization is likely doing tons of incredible work, but maybe the waste reduction part of it is just a small thing. And we kind of need you to move as quickly as is reasonable to those directly related functions. The other problem is not being specific about project details. So sometimes that means it gets lost in the weeds of unimportant things, and sometimes it means that it's too broad and we don't really know what you're doing, where you're doing it, or why it's important. The other thing we see is that it doesn't match the rest of the application. I tend to think this might be because one person is putting together the financial information and another person is writing the application summary. But it can be really, it can look pretty bad when you have different numbers, different equipment, different items listed in the rest of your application that don't show up in your executive summary. When we look at a strong application, it addresses the scoring criteria. That is what you're going to be scored on. So you should be arguing that you are strong in all of those criteria, as many as possible. It concisely summarizes the project. Always remember that our scoring team, they're doing their best, but they are reading lots of applications. So you want to make sure that you get to the point and that they remember what the important information was because they didn't have to wade through a lot of extra. The information should be clear and readable to outsiders. This is hard for all of us. We get really into what we're doing and the jargon and all of those familiar words and phrases. But you have to keep in mind that the scores come from different backgrounds. They may not do exactly what you do. So you want it to be able to be understandable by anyone. And then a really strong application anticipates the questions that would come up and provides the answers right there in the summary. Instead of waiting and hoping that you can answer that during a scoring meeting, go ahead and give the answer right away. Some important notes is that summaries will look different depending on your situation. A new applicant versus a past grantee is going to look different. A new applicant is going to have to share a little bit more information about who they are to lend credence to their ability to pull this off. Whereas a past grantee may be able to just say, hey, remember all those projects we've been doing? We want to keep doing those. It can look different based on if it's a government or a nonprofit business. A government doesn't have to justify its existence. It says, this is who we are, this is what services we offer, and it can move right into talking about the project. Whereas a nonprofit or a business might have to give a little bit more information about why they are needed or why this service is something that they should provide. It can also look different based on whether it's a new venture or an expansion of your service or maintenance. It's a lot easier to talk about how you've been doing this great project and you just need some help upgrading some of the equipment to maintain your operations. Versus if this is a brand new venture and you have to lay a lot more groundwork for why it's necessary and why it's going to benefit the community. I also want to make sure you know that there's not just one right way to organize your executive summary. The order should make sense, though. It should flow in some kind of rational way. So I'm going to talk about, kind of go through an order as we talk in this tutorial, but the order that I put things in doesn't have to be what you use. So for example, here are just a few options on how someone may structure their executive summary. So they may have a background, what's going on, what the need is, what the plan is, what the costs are, and what the impact will be. Maybe someone wants to follow exactly on the headers of our scoring criteria. So they may have an About Us section, followed by the 3 sections of our scoring criteria: project plan and goals, management and finances, and project impact. Another one that's a little bit broader, introduction, current situation, project description, expected outcomes. I tend to like doing things by questions, as you'll see as we go through this. So perhaps you want to invert that. Maybe you don't want to say, here's who we are, here's what we think the problem is, here's how we're going to fix it. Maybe you want to flip that on its head and say, here's the problem. Here's what can be done to solve it, and why us? Why are we the ones that you should trust with funding to try and help with this problem? So again, there's not any one right way to do it, but it should make sense as you're reading through it. So I always think it's important to introduce yourself and give a foundation for your capability as an entity. So we're going to take a look at two different approaches to this. The first, and these are real applicants who have been funded. The first we're going to look at is a new applicant, and it's a bit wordy, so we'll skip a little bit as we go. Since 1971, Serve Inc. has been providing critical basic needs to the people of Callaway County, a rural county in the heart of Missouri. Serve's purpose is to support those in our community who need it most. Serve provides essential services such as transportation, food, emergency utility support, housing aid, clothing, school supplies, medication assistance, and connection to other services. We are the only agency in Callaway County that provides a one-stop shop for basic needs in a very rural area. As part of our mission, Serve operates a secondhand store, Trends. The Trends store is Callaway County's only comprehensive secondhand store, providing affordable items to the community while reducing waste by diverting usable goods from the landfill. The store accepts donations of clothing, household items, and more, reselling these items to meet community needs and promote sustainability. So the reason why I selected this is that this was a first-time applicant, and they secured $100,000 in funding for their program. So it's a really strong, a strong application. We don't typically have first-time applicants do so well. What I like about this is that clearly their organization does tons of things in the community, and this might not even be their primary focus, but they are able to give a context. They spend a little bit of time saying, here's how big we are, so you can trust us. We know how to manage things. And then they move right into what's relevant. So this Trends store, the secondhand store, that's the part of what they're doing that they need us to start focusing on as they make the request. Now, on the other hand, we have a government who has received funding for multiple projects. Let's see how it's different. The city of Fulton, situated in Callaway County, Missouri, is home to approximately 12,600 residents. This number swells seasonally due to the influx of students from local colleges. As a comprehensive municipality, we pride ourselves on delivering essential services, including electric, water, gas, sewer, and solid waste management, to enhance the quality of life for our residents. Our community is vibrant and diverse, featuring more than 200 small businesses that contribute significantly to our local economy. However, these businesses often struggle with the financial and logistical hurdles of participating in large commercial recycling programs. So, for a government, they don't need to explain everything that they do. They're a government. You know them pretty well. So, because of that, they're able to move really quickly, and they actually already introduced kind of the problem that they're going to hope to address with their project. And they did it in a shorter amount of time. So it's not that you always have to be very, very brief or that you always have to be very in depth. You have to think about your entity and what makes sense for introducing yourself and beginning to make the argument. Now, the next thing to go over here is describing the problem. All of our grants are going to address a problem. And these are not just operational grants, they are projects. So I like to think about these as an inverted funnel here. So you start with the top problem, waste. We know that's the problem. That's what our grant is addressing. But then as you go down, you may have any number of these that your project is going to address. And I think it's helpful to put the context of the project, the context of the problem out there for the reviewers to understand. So perhaps the problem is the waste type that's a problem is mattresses. So you may say, this many, do some research, this many mattresses end up in the landfill every year. And for mattresses, the problem might be end markets. So you say, we are working on, we've connected with some of the metal manufacturers and some of the textile manufacturers to create a better system for end markets for these materials. Maybe the problem is access. Maybe it's we have reached out and have a partnership with this mattress recycling organization, but there is nowhere to collect the mattresses in our area. So we need to. That's always what you want to drive at. So the problem could be any number of things. It could be the end markets. It could be that there's not programs that exist. It could be that people don't know what to do with a certain waste. They're not aware. It could be the access. Maybe there's no services available in your part of the community. It could be capacity, that your organization is already doing important work, but you don't have the ability to keep doing it at the rate that it's needed. Maybe it's equipment. Maybe you've been doing the work in the community to address the problems, but your equipment is aging and you need to repair it. So let's take a look at an example. This is considering Bluebird Composting, a frequent grantee that we have had. Their problem is food waste, and there's a myriad of information out there that you could use to describe concisely that the food waste is a problem. You could say it's this big problem in the world, and according to the state surveys, it's this proportion of the waste stream in Missouri. And then they get quickly down into how that problem is in context in mid-Missouri. So right now, Bluebird Composting, the problem is food waste. That's what they're hoping to address. And they're already doing it. But they only have 8 vendors in the service area that are getting pickups for their commercial food waste. And so the problem directly is that the cost and efficiency of their program needs improvement. They need to make it more affordable and more convenient for commercial, industrial kitchen operations to take advantage of this service, which will then reduce food waste. Let's continue with that example about Bluebird composting. This is from their actual application. So the next thing they're going to address is how their project will help with this problem that they've identified. This is what they had to say. We believe that making the process of recycling food waste easier and lowering the per unit cost will encourage more Central Missouri food vendors to start recycling their food waste rather than sending it to a landfill. Making the entire process easier and faster for the vendors and Bluebird Compost staff to load the waste on our truck, reducing the cost of moving the waste to our facility in Callaway County, and delivering the empty containers back right away to the vendor's dock will allow us to reduce the per unit pickup charge by 25%. So Bluebird's project here is not a new service. It is a maintenance of their existing service, and they're making a really good argument here of why this grant funding to help them reduce the per unit pickup charge will help address the problem. They can't get more people involved in reducing their commercial food waste until they're able to improve the cost and efficiency. So it's depending on your project, going to look quite different. Here's another example. So we talked earlier about the resale store at Serve Inc. This is how they described how their project will help. A larger warehouse-style facility will allow us to significantly increase the quantity and types of items we can accept, including furniture, building supplies, and other larger items that are currently turned away. By providing a destination for these materials, we will extend the life cycle of goods that would otherwise contribute to landfill waste in Callaway County. Additionally, the expanded space will allow us to sort and store items more efficiently, ensuring that even more donations are resold or repurposed rather than discarded. Items that may not be immediately sellable will be assessed for repair or repurposing. For example, clothing unsuitable can be redirected to textile programs, broken furniture, and electronics will have new opportunities for repair in a future makerspace. This comprehensive approach maximizes the potential of every item donated, ensuring that nothing is wasted unnecessarily. So their inverted pyramid, their inverted triangle would, start off with the problem of waste, of whether that be household waste, textile waste, etc. So that's the problem. Maybe they say, and I think they did say this, that they're the only place in Callaway County that offers resale of all of those types of difficult waste in the household. So then, you keep going down. The problem may be we've run out of space. We can no longer accept large donations. We don't have enough room to be able to keep our efforts towards this waste problem going. So we need a bigger space. That is their direction that they're moving towards. They start out with the big problem and then they're moving down to why this request is here, and then they're making the argument of how it will help. All right, so it also needs to be clear. It's somewhat surprising that sometimes the budget is there and then the executive summary never really explains what exactly is being asked for. And I think that can be because project managers and people who are really involved in the day to day, they're focusing on so many things and they forget that other people aren't right there with them. They don't understand exactly what is being asked for. So it's important to be very clear with that. Let's take a look here. This is a request from the food bank, which was funded a couple years ago. The retail rescue fleet is currently made up of 2 refrigerated box trucks and 1 refrigerated van. One box truck is 15 years old and has reached the end of its service life. Along with the normal wear and tear, this older truck has developed leaks in its box, which creates a mold concern, making it undesirable for food transportation. The food bank is graciously requesting financial support to assist in purchasing a replacement truck that will ensure continuity in the retail rescue program. Staff at the market conduct pickups with box trucks 6 days a week. If the organization only has one serviceable box truck, regularly scheduled maintenance would produce short-term disruptions. A second box truck ensures the product pickup from retailers will continue uninterrupted. So you may find with your application that you describe the problem and the request or how you will solve it in the request all kind of mixed in together, and that's fine. It just needs to be clear as you write it what you're asking for funding for and why. Let's take a look at another example. All right, this is for a grant at the University of Missouri. If approved for this grant, MU will purchase the requested 20 cubic foot totes, which will be placed at several buildings. These totes will replace existing 2-yard dumpsters serviced by the city, and the totes will be serviced by campus personnel. Signage and education materials will be updated as part of an overall effort to update these materials for all recycling efforts and make them more effective. So this is a much smaller program. It was one of our small grant requests, I believe, last year or 2 years ago. And it's not super flowery, it's pretty direct, and that is just fine. For a lot of our programs, it is just, we need to buy this truck to drive to more places to pick up more recycling. That's fine. Some of our winning applications have a half-page executive summary. So whatever makes sense in your situation, it can still be a strong request. Let's move over into the financial side of it. So there should always be a clear connection between your budget, what you're requesting to be able to purchase with the funds, and your executive summary. So your executive summary should include an explanation and justification for your costs. One of our scoring criteria, the top level 20 points you can get, which is 10% of the maximum score, it's a very important criteria. It says that requested funds will be used on crucial expenses which are key to meeting project goals. So if you've put on there that you need marketing materials done, and then you don't mention the marketing component of your project at all, my scoring committee will be left to wonder, well, why do you need the marketing? You don't even talk about it. That's one of those questions that you want to anticipate and answer in the executive summary. So you need to say, we are expanding service territory, and because of that, we will need to devote some money to updating our outreach materials, doing a television ad or doing a postcard to this new customer base to let them know. And that's why we are asking for funding for marketing materials. Whatever is in there, it should be clear. So you may just be buying one truck, and it's very simple to say, we have to have the truck to pick up the materials. But for some of our more complicated projects, and especially for newer applicants who don't have a long history of success with the district, you want to make sure that the argument has been made that we want to use this funding on this very important thing because we need it to be able to solve the problem. Now, your budget should be detailed, logical, and comprehensive with budget notes for itemized expenses. So, you may have on your budget 20 totes, like the Mizzou explanation. But unless you say, we are buying 20 totes so that we can optimize them at 10 buildings with one in, the front of the building and one where our maintenance staff will be using, then until you say that, then you're left leaving people to guess what you will use these items for. So use your budget and your executive summary together to make the argument for those costs. So again, consider what questions the scorers will have about the budget and then answer them briefly, directly to the point. This is why we need that money. All right, we're almost done. Some simple tips for you to think about as you finish your executive summary. First, read your summary out loud. It can be really helpful to identify some strange turns of phrase or maybe some grammar issues or confusion when you copied and pasted from one document to another. So always read your summary out loud to identify some of those issues. I also encourage people to have an outsider read their summary. So, whether it's someone's partner at home or somebody in the office who has nothing to do with this project, it's really good to have someone read it who is a little bit more unfamiliar with what you're doing and what you're trying to do. That way, you can kind of mimic what the scoring committee experience will be like and identify questions that come up. Always score your application using the criteria. Make sure you download that criteria right along with the application. Not every application or every project is going to be strong in every criteria, but you need to speak to as many of those criteria as possible and make the argument for why you should be receiving funding. Use headers. So we've had some trouble in the past, but we've updated our application and you may now do bold and underline. So when you are putting together your application, I really encourage you to use a header, whether it's about us, plan, problem, whatever organization structure you use, headers will be really helpful to have the scorers quickly be able to reference back and get questions answered. So they will come into the scoring meeting having read your application already, but they may think of a question as they're sitting there and wonder, oh, well, how are they going to let people know about this service? And if you have headers, it will help them get to the information quickly to be able to answer that question. So when you are doing the application, it's a fillable PDF. You can highlight what you want to be a header. You can do Control U for underline, Control B for bold, or right click and do either of those things. And then use the preliminary application opportunity. So a lot of times people use the preliminary application kind of last minute. They remember that they wanted to apply and they look and they realize the deadline is, the next day. But the more work you put into the preliminary application, which is just your info sheet, your executive summary, and your budget, the more work you put into that, the more staff can give you feedback about what you should improve on, or whether you're right on the right track, or maybe if you're off in the weeds. So the more you use that, the more beneficial it will be to you. And then communicate with staff promptly. So my job is to try and help all the applicants present the best projects and be prepared for their projects the best possible. So I'm happy to help all of our applicants think through how they align with the grant program, if they align with the grant program, and then how to present their project in the best possible way to demonstrate what they plan to do in the community. So please communicate with us. Go to recyclemidmo.com. Make sure you've watched all of the tutorial videos and taken advantage of all the resources, and you can always book a meeting to discuss specific questions that you have. Thanks so much, and good luck with your application.